Hey everyone, it's FLAK. When Battlefield 2042 released in 2021, it did so with little fanfare and a lot of criticism. Much of this was absolutely deserved. The game was unfocused, it lacked features, and was generally in rough shape. Since then, DICE have been steadily working to turn 2042 around. Now it seems like those efforts are paying off big. For this video, we're going to talk about that success, outline the steps developers took to revive the game, and pinpoint what's still on the to-do list. I will say this is going to be a long video, maybe the longest one I've ever done on the channel, I don't know, but regardless, go ahead and settle in. I think it's quite easy to understate the turnaround we've seen from DICE and company in regards to Battlefield 2042. I say this because it isn't their first rodeo. You might recall the developers largely salvaged Battlefield 5's reputation and even built Star Wars Battlefront 2 into a standout title post-launch. Arguably, Battlefield 2042 is in rougher shape than both of these games, making what's going on right now even more remarkable. And if you've been out of the loop, Battlefield 2042 is sort of having its own renaissance. The website True Trophies, which tracks trophies and gaming data from 500,000 PlayStation accounts, reported a 578% increase to Battlefield 2042's player count in March. This actually catapulted the game into 5th place on the chart of popular titles, surpassing even that of GTA 5. Part of this is due to Battlefield 2042 being the PS Plus Game of the Month, but the numbers continue to improve on other platforms, and the recent release of Season 4 content certainly helped. Steam Charts reveals the potential player base is responding to initiatives from EA to promote the game. We've got things like free weekends and sales. Those have notably driven the player base higher in recent months on PC. We don't really have any Xbox data, but it's safe to assume similar behavior across platforms, especially with Battlefield 2042 being part of Xbox's Game Pass Ultimate subscription. Popular opinion seems to be improving as well. Recent Steam reviews have shifted from mostly negative to mixed, reflecting a more positive sentiment in the community. Even some of the game's harshest critics are recognizing the improvements made by DICE, Ripple Effect, and Ridgeline Studios. We gotta keep in mind there's still a ways to go here, but the approach of listening to the fan base and making changes is clearly paying off. Since launch, developers have actively sought input from the community to transform the title, and they have done that in demonstrable ways. Battlefield 2042 had a slew of issues many were unsure could be overcome, and as part of this video today, let's look at some of those here and how DICE responded to them. Specialists have of course been a big point of contention in the community. There were a number of reasons for this. They crippled the long-standing Battlefield class system, diluted friend or foe identification, and their characterization was at odds with other elements of Battlefield 2042. Since launch, developers have walked back their plans for specialists and have officially announced they are done with the concept after Camila Blasco, who arrived in Season 4. Similarly, Season 3 saw the reintroduction of a more traditional class system into Battlefield 2042. Specialists do remain part of the equation, but class choice is now more impactful under the new system and its limitations. This plays a major role in bringing back that Battlefield feel to the franchise. Class gadgets and weapon proficiencies make combat more predictable, and DICE have addressed friend or foe identification with UI changes and adding more identifiable features like team-specific lights and glow sticks. It's not perfect, but it's probably as good as we're gonna get under the new system. They also removed the cringeworthy quips during the end-of-round screens, which undermined the game's more serious narrative. On that note, developers also elevated the game's story. Since launch, they created a special section on the game's website that explains exactly what is going on in the Battlefield 2042 universe. In addition, each specialist has their own background that ties into the larger narrative. If you take some time to explore the lore of the game, it's actually pretty compelling. It involves plenty of spycraft and some geoengineering tech that can transform the NOPAD's shattered world. It's what they're fighting for now, and it gives the world of Battlefield 2042 some much-needed dimension. It's not clear how much the death of Irish's voice actor, Michael K. Williams, has impacted the game's narrative, but it looks like the writing team is set on keeping his character around, which is a nice tribute. Meanwhile, gameplay saw significant improvements. Aside from the integration of a class system, DICE most notably acknowledged and addressed what has been called the mouse input bug. This caused a lot of grief for PC players. It meant aiming never felt right, and of course that is a big issue for an FPS title. After months of work, that problem has largely been resolved. Another addition was the scoreboard. It's incomprehensible that a game like Battlefield 2042 launched without one, but the new one actually tallies meaningful team contributions like assists and revives, which can showcase a player's skill outside of their kill-to-death ratio. In many ways, it's the best scoreboard that we've seen in Battlefield. Developers addressed another UI issue with an update to the end-of-round screen. Previously, players could easily cancel matchmaking because the game state was unclear, resulting in a more frustrating and likely redundant experience. We also shouldn't forget that Battlefield 2042 launched without voice chat. While this is true that players can use apps like Discord, the idea of a AAA title launching in 2023 without native voice chat is simply bizarre. Thankfully, this was resolved a few updates back. DICE have also been hammering out changes to vehicles, not only adding new ones, but finding ways to effectively balance them. You probably recall that at launch, transport helicopters were extremely overpowered thanks to a complement of crude guns. Those have since been nerfed, with the Hind and the Condor taking on distinctly more transportational roles. New additions like the Tor Tank and the Brawler fill gaps in the gameplay meta, and similarly, developers recently reorganized the overall vehicle system. This limited the number of available vehicles and their types, and I think it's a decision that is criminally overlooked. It's one of the smartest moves developers have made with 2042 so far. This ensures newly added vehicles see some use on the battlefield, but also limits the most powerful options, preventing a small group from simply steamrolling an entire team. DICE also addressed a lackluster slate of launch weapons in Battlefield 2042. In the past several months, several new weapons have been added, while developers also tapped into the power of nostalgia and the game's Portal mode to bring back some classic weapons that are fan favorites. And I gotta say, it feels like 2042 finally has the appropriate amount of weapons compared to previous titles. The game's Plus system was an underrated addition, and I do think that helps the variety of weapons go further. The same could be said for gadgets and specialties. DICE had quite a few of those from previous games in the series, while mixing in some new stuff. Not really a fan of the most recent grenade cheese, but more team-oriented options like Blasco's infiltration device can be very useful. Meanwhile, developers recognized their map design was not up to snuff. DICE actually acknowledged this and has been methodically reworking Battlefield 2042's launch maps over the last year or so. At this point, every map except Hourglass has been overhauled. Building massive maps around 128 players has huge challenges. I will 100% admit that. I see it in the way that it plays, but the original versions felt very disjointed, like a collection of objectives randomly tossed onto a map with large stretches of open ground between them. That, to me, kind of a recipe for disaster. The new map reworks significantly improve map flow and have added cover, which in turn creates more space for more meaningful gun battles. With Portal, DICE has a few extra maps to pad map variety, but so far they've only partially exploited this. We've got game modes like Exodus Conquest, those integrate classic maps like Valparaiso, No-Shar Canals into the core 2042 experience, still leaving out some of those other classic maps. Another big improvement, especially when compared to previous games, is update tempo. This often falls between the cracks. Not a lot of people necessarily pick up on this. I have personally given DICE plenty of flack in the past for it, months would go by without any substantial updates to the game. And what we're seeing with Battlefield 2042's live service is encouraging. Updates are more frequent and actually add new content improvements or other changes on a regular basis, right? Just an example of this, Update 4.0 here recently added the AEK, and it also overhauled armor plates. Instead of them covering the entire body, they now only cover the torso and the upper arms. I'll admit, yeah, that makes logical sense, but this shows developers are now moving into the details of the game and are committed to improving that gameplay experience. These are just a few of the ways DICE have seriously bettered the Battlefield 2042 experience, but they're not done, right? We know devs continue to fill out 2042 with new content and meaningful changes. So up next, let's take a look at what we know is on deck for the future of the game. Like the other reworks of the original launch maps, Hourglass will be getting the same treatment. And again, this actually represents quite a milestone. With it, DICE will have revamped every launch map in Battlefield 2042, fulfilling their promise to update the game to the level of quality they expect from a Battlefield title. I remember them making a real big deal about this, and it's important to follow through, especially if they want to continue restoring community confidence. Although Season 4 is going to be drawing to a close, DICE and EA surprised much of the community by announcing content would continue and Season 5 is on the way. We know this includes at least one new, yet unnamed map. DICE teased this map earlier this year, saying, quote, "You'll set foot on a forgotten battleground where armies clashed decades ago while trying to secure a vital train track being used for the transportation of armaments." As the region is once again engulfed in conflict, attempts are taking place to capture the route for the delivery of heavy armor to key positions. Attempting to stop the enemy's plans, a counteroffensive prepares for an ambush that will secure the much-needed supply line and tip the balance of power back in their favor. We've been told this relates to a map in Battlefield 4. Do know it won't be a remaster, but instead further explore a familiar locale. Based on the description we just heard, it wouldn't surprise me if this was related to maybe Zavad 311 or Golmud Railway. We've got some concept art here, doesn't tell us a whole lot, but I think DICE is going to bank on whatever provides the biggest nostalgia factor. The confirmation of Season 5 was a bit of a surprise to me personally. I had no idea if developers were going to call it quits after delivering the minimum amount promised. There is no guarantee that content goes beyond this here, but there was recently a technical issue that revealed Battlefield 2042 might be getting an entire new year of content. EA's Origin launcher showed placeholder text for a Battlefield 2042 Year 2 upgrade. It's important to point out this does not necessarily mean significant new content for the game in terms of maps, weapons, vehicles, etc. Battlefield 2042's Year 1 pass included full access to 4 battle passes plus some additional cosmetics. I'll go out on a limb to guess that Year 2 includes all of the previous unlocks from past battle passes plus access to 4 new ones. Each season so far has included a new map, so I think it's likely we'll see that going forward. Is that enough to get the Battlefield fanbase to cough up additional money after a questionable launch? I don't know, but as we've seen so far in this video, things are in a much better place now than they were at launch. Certainly, this kind of upgrade also supposed to appeal to longtime Battlefield fans that have, up to this point, avoided Battlefield 2042. As for future weapons, gadgets, and vehicles, our beloved data miner Temporal has taken a bit of a break, but not before revealing a couple of things could be in the works. The AUG, SKS, and USAS-12 have been referenced in the files, plus there are a slew of portal weapons that could migrate into core Battlefield 2042. For gadgets, Temporal has spotted the wire-guided SRAW anti-tank launcher from Battlefield 4 and the laser trip mine from Battlefield Hardline. That last one is a surprise, and I would love to see more Hardline content make an appearance. With Blasco being the last specialist, it's safe to assume that another that was data mined named Hale has been scrapped. They had a remote control RC car as a specialty, so we might see that as a gadget sometime in the future. For vehicles, the Russian Su-70 Hunter G unmanned drone has been spotted in the files, and it does have a mastery badge associated with it. That likely means it's going to make a gameplay appearance sometime soon. Temporal also noted what looks like a derivative of the American X-47B. You can actually see that in a loading screen, and it would be a natural counterpart. Keep in mind, all of this here is currently speculation. In terms of concrete stuff, we do know that there are a bunch of other features coming to Battlefield 2042. All chat is going to make a return sometime soon. During a podcast, DICE revealed the feature is almost complete, and on a similar note, squad management is coming as well. Up to this point, players have been unable to boot squad mates, and if you left a squad, it was basically impossible to join a new one. I'd also like the ability to team switch as well, but that's probably a pipe dream. On another note, DICE has revealed they are looking into feedback on the state of jets in Battlefield 2042. Recent changes improved parity for some fighters, and it now seems like a larger rework may be in the cards. No time frame given for an overhaul of jet gameplay. I'll be following that topic closely here, so keep your eye out. So, at this juncture, we've talked about everything developers have done with Battlefield 2042 and are likely to do, so let's look at what I feel they still need to do. One of the loudest themes from the community is the call for more maps. Battlefield 2042 and its subsequent expansions have lagged behind previous titles in this regard, and the fact remains that no matter how many weapons and vehicles you add to a game, without changes in setting, it does tend to get stale. DICE can still pull from its Portal selection, of course, but many players will still find the one map a season pacing pedestrian, even for a live service. Battlefield 2042 could also do with an overhaul of how players join games. Adding a server browser, I think, would be a good start. We've had that conversation many times. This exists for Portal, but not in core Battlefield 2042. Dedicated servers would complement this, as there's no guarantee you'll stay on the same server or any way to tell which map you're going to play next. As much as I love exposure, it gets a bit old if I wind up playing it 3 times in a row. Again, Portal's dedicated servers showcase a map rotation, letting you know what's on deck. Love to see that in Core 2042. Probably quite involved to overhaul all of this, so I'm not getting my hopes up for it just yet. Meanwhile, 2042 is still grappling with the jump to 128 players. I've outlined in previous videos why I think this is a bad move. I don't really see them doing it going forward, but it boils down to it being too unpredictable and alienating fans of past games. 2042 doesn't have a permanent 64-player Conquest game mode, and I'll be honest, if Exodus Conquest isn't available, I just simply don't play the game. I think adding a permanent 64-player game mode would be just a general smart idea. EA and DICE also need to sort some issues with the game's launcher. Since the rollover from the Origin app to the EA app, there are some recurring issues that can make it difficult to launch the game reliably. Obviously, this only affects PC players, but it's still a problem. On that topic, there's something that impacts everyone. As Battlefield 2042's popularity increases, so too does the potential impact of cheaters. Personally, I've yet to encounter anyone I believe to be cheating, but I have seen some examples. Developers need to remain vigilant in addressing and preventing the problem, and EA needs to be reactive in banning cheaters if 2042's renaissance is to continue. Lastly, I'd love to see more content driven by fan service. Battlefield 2042 has only begun exploring content of past games like Battlefield 3, adding previous maps, weapons, vehicles, and gadgets from different titles should continue. To be clear, not advocating to see Metro in here again. Give me lockers instead. I think spectator mode should obviously be part of this conversation as well. That was a great tool to support competitive gaming, but it also spurred a ton of content creation from the community. I still use spectator mode in Battlefield 1 and Battlefield 5 regularly, I really wish I had the same capabilities with 2042. Word of mouth still drives video game sales, and spectator mode should be recognized for its potential with this. Overall, though, Battlefield 2042 has changed a lot since launch. We shouldn't forget or necessarily forgive its problematic start, but we should recognize the tremendous amount of work and commitment from developers that has happened since. DICE has also notably opened up to the community's feedback and then acted upon those suggestions. That's a complete 180 from the game's alpha and beta tests. I want to say that, and they've done a lot of work on repairing their image in the community. That still needs to continue. I am really curious to see where we go in the future, but I thought it was, appropriate to take stock of where we are right now. If you have any suggestions for developers, right, things you want to see changed or added, please tell me in the comments below. Otherwise, tell me your thoughts on the state of Battlefield 2042. Has it finally met expectations? Will it ever? Let me know. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If not, a dislike. Make sure to subscribe and tap the bell to get updates on all future Battlefield videos. If you want to support the channel, keep your money, share this video, or check out some of our channel sponsors down below in the video description. A lot of interesting stuff happening with our partners in Meta PC, Gamer Advantage as well, so check those out. Aside from that, as always, thanks for watching.